For those that I've not met before, my name's Eric Nordberg, and I'm the Dean of Libraries here at the Paul Meek Library. Actually, I should follow my own advice and stand in front of the camera. Thank you all for coming out today for this event and to welcome our featured faculty scholar for the fall semester, Dr. Amy Richards, who in one of my messages said any Richards, so some of you I think came looking for any old Richards today, but you're going to get Amy, and I'm sure it's going to be a very good presentation. A couple of housekeeping rules. If you haven't been in the space before, restrooms are back down that way to the left. There are refreshments. You should be encouraged to get up during the talk and eat more food. Otherwise, we give away the extras to students here, and you should get your fair share before they disappear. We're very happy to continue this series. This is our third year doing the UT Martin Research Series. And for those of you that have been here before, you'll know my usual spiel is that as an institution that's largely known as a teaching institution, very often people forget that our faculty members each have a research agenda. They each do research of various types. Some of it results in publication, some of it results in performance, some of it garners external grant awards, some of it produces all sorts of other outputs that involve students. And so we really wanted this series to kind of call out people that have been doing research here, talk about their research projects, and kind of highlight this very important work that gets done. We're going to continue this series through the fall. We have 2 more events, and kind of unusual for us this year, those 2 events are actually going to be down at the Martin Public Library because we're working in conjunction with the people there to host a traveling Smithsonian exhibit. The exhibit's called Voices and Votes. It looks at democracy in America. It's a traveling exhibit that reproduces the content of a historical exhibit at the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. And so we have 2 speakers planned for our series that will actually take place there. At 6 o'clock on Thursday, October the 12th, Dr. Chris Baxter from the Political Science Department in the College of Business and Global Affairs will give a talk looking at current constitutional issues, which fits in nicely with the theme of that exhibit. And then in November, 6 o'clock on Thursday, November 16th, Dr. Dan McDonough is going to give us a talk looking at the creation of the Bill of Rights back at the beginning of our nation's history, again tying into that exhibit. My thanks to Jace Williams. He's helping run some of the technology here today, so appreciate that, and greetings to folks that may be watching us on the live stream. This also gives us the opportunity to record these events so that people can watch them afterwards. And we've had an increasing amount of use of that stream and the recording playback. Of course, we appreciate that people come to the events. It should also be an opportunity for you to talk to the speaker afterwards, to talk to each other about some of the things that are presented here. I do want to acknowledge Dr. Keith Dooley, Chair of the Family and Consumer Science Department here. And I know that I had greetings sent from Todd Winters, the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences, and also from Dr. Phil Cavalier, our provost, neither of whom could be here. But they all send along special greetings to Amy for this award. Each year, the Provost's office selects 2 featured faculty members, one in the fall semester and one in the spring semester. These are intended to further highlight the scholarly activities, both teaching and research, as well as service for our faculty members. And so Dr. Richards today is our selection for the fall semester. She gets a small cash stipend that goes along with that. And has a small display. If you may have passed on your way in, stop and have a look as you go. A brief introduction, because I really want you to get to her talk, but we know that Dr. Richards is an associate professor in the Department of Family and Consumer Sciences here in the College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences. What you may not know is that she's also the director of the didactic program in dietetics here. She is a dietitian, registered dietitian, with degrees in nutrition, exercise and food science, and family and consumer science. And she's involved in teaching alongside a couple of other faculty. It's a relatively small unit that works with dietetics here, but they offer an undergraduate degree and a master's degree with a couple of different concentrations as well. So it's a popular program that's been doing very good things here. She has South Dakota connections, where she was an educational specialist for many years, worked with the USD on grant-funded activity while she was there. A lot of her focus has been looking at nutrition for school-age children. I think she's going to touch on that a little bit tonight. The note we had here is her research interests have delved into a variety of interests: nutrition for children and young adults, relationship between yoga and weight control. I could probably learn a couple of things there myself. Gardening as an educational tool, correlations between various health factors, and interdisciplinary student education. So with that, maybe you can help me welcome Dr. Amy Richards.
Well, thank you very much for the very warm welcome. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm not known for talking loudly, but I am on microphone, so those on camera should hopefully be able to see me and hear me okay. I am very humbled by this. I'm very grateful for this. I appreciate the kind of the vote of support from my peers, and I appreciate you showing up for this. I could not do it by myself. None of us have gotten to where we are by ourselves. We stand on the shoulders of others. So the mentors I've had over the years, the teachers I've had over the years, the supervisors I've had over the years, all the different people, the colleagues and friends over the years, my parents, all the different people, they've all meant a lot to me. They've all helped me to get to where I am, so I'm very grateful for that. I'd be happy to visit more afterwards about maybe a little this or that, but for most part, I'm going to probably just get going with my slides, because you probably have places you need to be, you have meals you need to cook, all those different things, and I'm happy to stay for questions afterwards if you have some of those. We may do a few activities within, we'll see. We'll see how it feels. I am known for doing that in my classes. I'm known for, some of my research has been that way, where we get people up and moving, and it works, that you can make a difference that way. So we'll see. You may be getting up. I'll wait and see how things are going. If you start looking a little sleepy, we'll probably have you get up and get going, so we'll see. All right, now I don't know if I can see this. See if I can turn it a little bit. I'm kind of afraid to turn it after last time. We think it'll be okay? Well, it quit working the last time I moved it. Okay. We still have a picture, that's good. Now do you think I assume I'm on camera if I step over this way, hopefully. Okay, so adventures and misadventures in research. So the reason I titled it that is I, probably like many of you, have things go very well with research. I've had things kind of fall into my lap where it's like I got publications that really didn't take a lot of work. I happened to be around the right people at the right time. And I've had things that I've worked on that maybe still aren't finalized or eventually had to let go of. And then there's just some interesting things that happen. I've learned some things that I wouldn't have expected. There's been some kind of fun things to report. So plus I just sound like a more fun title than just talking about one random outcome or something like that. So to start off with, I can give kind of a flyover. What have I been doing the last, somebody's like, they see a reunion, what have you been doing the last 20-some years? So my research activity probably started like all yours did when you were 1 or 2 years old and you started dropping things off your little play table to see what happened. Those that do child studies, they talk about the little scientists, the children that are doing stuff. I dug up anthills because I thought that was interesting. Now, did I publish? No. But as I got older, I started getting more interested, and I always loved science. It wasn't, though, until I went back to college to become a dietitian that I ended up doing true research, where it was publishable research. And that happened to be kind of a fluke. The DPD director where I was going kept trying to talk me into being a graduate research assistant. I was not sure I wanted to do this. I had other things I wanted to do. I wanted to become a dietitian. I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, but it changed my career path, and it was a really good thing. And so when we talk about one of my studies, it was one of those things that the stars aligned, so to speak, then. On the other hand, I put in a lot of work, and I think for the students that are watching, whether they're on the camera or later, or the rest of you, hard work does pay off, and we're going to see that. All right, so a quick flyover of what I did. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about a few of the studies. This little thing I thought was pretty interesting. I guess my highlighter doesn't work, but how the text got bigger, that was an accident. I don't know how that happened, but I decided to keep it because I thought it was interesting. But interesting tidbits, fun facts, lesson learns, and what-if moments. We'll talk about a few of those. Tips for aspiring researchers and maybe myself, things that I can remember as well, thinking about going forward. Time for questions. And some of you in this room are very well published. You're more of an expert in some of these things than I am, but hopefully you'll find something interesting from this. Hopefully you'll think, okay, I learned about a different area of research that I don't practice in. I learned about something they do in dietetics, or I learned about something that I didn't know before that's an interesting, fun fact. Or maybe I want to try to do some kind of collaboration. I'm always open to those as well. All right, so the flyover. Now originally, I, like maybe some of you, had like a really, really lot of stuff on this slide. It's like I was going to tell you every little, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time, but and I thought, nope, this is getting way too crowded. So a lot of the rest falls under that, a few other miscellaneous things here and there. But we're going to see, I was on the airplane. I couldn't do a lot of things while I was flying to South Dakota, so I was experimenting with these little random things you can do with the slides. And so I think in a minute we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff come bouncing in. There we go. And so anyway, so fun effects, maybe they help, maybe they don't, I don't know. But we're going to spend a lot of my time today talking about quantitative research. That's the main type of research I've done. And so for those of you maybe that are students, aren't as familiar, there's what's called qualitative research, which is very different from quantitative. Quantitative, the word quantitate means that we're going to try to put a numerical basis on it. We're going to try to kind of define it empirically. I've done a little bit of qualitative research, but I've not been published in that area. When I first started as a research assistant, so I did focus groups. Focus groups are a kind of qualitative research. They're very helpful for sometimes figuring out what you're going to then do your quantitative research on. The ones that I was working with were looking at what motivates them to change. So if we're going to develop an intervention trying to get them to eat more fruits and vegetables, what do they think is actually going to work? And that was the qualitative part of it. And some of that I do believe was published. I just wasn't the one that was. I was a graduate student. I was helping with it. So we'll spend some time talking about increasing fruit and vegetable consumption. I've spent a lot of my time working in that area. Not as much recently. That's a little bit older work, but I think it's pretty interesting work. I've done several different projects that are interdisciplinary health education here. We're partnering with nursing. Also at the University of South Dakota when I was there. I was an instructor there many years ago. And I did several different projects there. And then there may be some other things we'll talk about related to that. I've done some other stuff too, but those are the two main ones we'll talk about studies. Yoga versus stretching for weight loss, we're not going to go into those studies today. You would be here a long time. They're kind of complicated. The association between sleep, stress, food security, eating behaviors, and weight, I'm not going to spend time talking about those studies either today. I'm happy to talk more about them with you later. They're pretty interesting. I could probably do a whole presentation just on those, and I may do that when I speak in the spring at the Nutrition Symposium on some of those different things. So. Just other little areas, been involved with manuscript reviewer for peer-reviewed journals. That actually is quite a good learning experience. You see, oh, they're missing this, this, and this. It's like, okay, maybe I need to think about that for myself. It's like I can see it a little differently when I look at other people's research that way. Faculty advisor for student research and class research assignments. I have done this for many years. So when I was an instructor at the University of South Dakota, my students had to do research projects like our interns do in our program, in our graduate program. And so I would oversee that. I didn't get my name on the poster, but I would oversee that. They learned, I learned. I learned all sorts of new stuff. And then many of you probably have your students do research papers. I learn a little bit from that every year. But what I'm doing now, and we'll see at the very end, is I've added a requirement to one of my graduate classes where the students have to do an IRB-approved project. And I think I have 7 or 8 students in that class. And so depending on how it all goes, it's my first year to do it. Everything's always a learning curve the first year. But I think a lot of those students are going to end up presenting posters probably at our nutrition symposium. They may present them at our statewide dietetics conference. They may be able to get them actually to our national conference, FENCI. And so that kind of helps justify taking students to conferences. It may help put them on a trajectory towards where they want to be a college professor someday. It may help put them on a trajectory where it just helps their resume, if nothing else. But they hopefully will develop some fondness for research. Now, do they like it right now? Probably not. They're right in that stage of where it's like, I got to figure out my topic, I got X amount of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I did have one write to me the other day that she was super excited about her project. So hopefully that stays. Hopefully that stays the same. Been a poster session judge. And then there's a few miscellaneous things that we'll do a whole nother presentation on some other day. All right, so we got to let these things flip around. I wasn't going to do them while I was talking. They're a little distracting, but I had a lot of fun on the airplane when I was trying to figure out which ones to use. I had the ones that zoomed in and the ones that zoomed out. And okay, that's the only slide I do that on. All right, just so you know. You don't want anybody getting seasick or anything. So now we're going to zoom in a little bit on increasing fruit and vegetable consumption. And I don't know, in the audience here, it doesn't look like we have a lot of students. I'm assuming we have kind of a few online. I know at least one instructor told me that they were giving extra credit for it. So we're going to assume they're watching it now online or they're watching it later. But I put this up here. I don't know how well you can see it from back there, and I'm afraid to walk too far away from the podium. But for those in the audience, I'm probably off camera right now. But this is actually my very first published study. This was my master's degree published study, and it was a big project. At one point, my advisor said, I think we picked too big of a project. I think you should back off. And I'm like, no. I like this project. And so she let me keep it, and we made it work. And she helped with lining up other students to help with little pieces of it. And it's been from a long time ago. It was published in 2004. But you can see that it's been, when you pull up this one, it's been cited 41 times. Now, some people out, even in the audience, might have something that's been cited 200 times or more, but it's still, it's saying it was a meaningful publication. It helped change things. This particular study, which we're going to talk about, used motivational interviewing, which was not taught in the classrooms. At least I didn't have it in my classroom when I was a dietetics student. A couple of faculty that are saying no, they didn't have it either. I now teach that in my class. I have a book that's been published on that subject. And so it wasn't the first study using that, but it was towards the beginning. It was kind of cutting edge as far as how do we figure out how to motivate people to change. And so in that study, as we'll see as we talk about it, I did motivational interviewing. I interviewed a whole bunch of students. But it is a form of getting them to think about things in a different way, and maybe they'll change. And the idea is to get them to. And in this case, it worked. All right, so we're going to talk about that study just because it's one of those where it seems to maybe been one of those little logs on the pile of knowledge that helped shift where we think about things. So the reason I got pulled into this study was my advisor, who I'm very grateful for, was part of a much larger consortium. And so with this consortium of people, they got grant dollars to do a lot of different things. And so she had access to some newsletters which I could learn. This is one of those things that kind of fell in my lap. I was lucky. I could use these stage-based newsletters, which we'll talk about. And she had the money to pay me to be a research assistant. And she let me work on this project during some of my research time. And she let me use some of her students that probably needed volunteer hours to go out and recruit students to help with different things, to help with data entry. So I was very lucky in this one. And I put in a ton of time. This was back in my life where I could. Now I'm like, man, I wish I had that kind of time to put in my studies now. That would be awesome. But we raised fruit and vegetable consumption by 1 serving. That's a really big deal because the studies weren't able to do that and they really weren't able to do it afterwards when they weren't using things like motivational interviewing. Now, granted, it's one study. One study is just one study. You have to look at all the studies together, and so if we were to pick them all apart, it's like maybe that we were just partly lucky that people increased. But when we talk about the motivational interviewing and things that I heard and what I know more now about motivational interviewing and how it works, it makes sense to me in a lot of ways that this worked. So what we see is we had a control group, we had an intervention group, and the control group did go up a little bit by one of our measures. So there was 2 different food frequency questionnaires, which are a way of asking people, how many fruits and vegetables do you eat a day? Only one was a lot longer. But when we looked at the 2 different ones together, we see that they were different. The intervention group really did significantly increase. This one, we were looking at lessons learned. I don't have this in the slides per se, but lessons learned from this study was when you can, have a statistician help you. So I was lucky enough that my advisor told me that, and she's like, go ask so-and-so if we can put their name on the paper and they'll help you with the stats. And so I was like, okay, I don't know if they're going to say yes, but I did, and he said yes. And then I was supposed to come up with my plan, what I was supposed to do, and the statistics we were going to do, I was supposed to give it to him. And he's like, oh, no, he didn't say it that way, but it's like, that's way too complicated. We're going to keep it very simple. And we're going to have basically t-tests, which are a form of statistics, and we're going to look at 2 different groups. I wanted to do all these correlations and all these different things. And he's like, no. And so, but it was publishable. When we get to that later study that I'm still trying to publish, it's got some wonderful things in it, but it's been really complicated. It's taken a lot of time to do the stats. And it's a lesson learned. So when possible, keep things simple. When possible, have a statistician help you. This one used the trans-theoretical model for behavior change, which there again, I don't remember learning about that in my undergraduate classes. Maybe some of you did. And then of course we use the motivational interviewing. And this one, I teach this in my classes now. And this is talking about stages of change. Where are people at in their readiness to change? Are they at pre-contemplation? Like, no, I'm not ready. I've never thought about it. I don't want to. Are they at contemplation? Like, that would be interesting. I wonder what it would be like if I started doing X, Y, or Z. They're not doing it, and they're not ready to do it, but at least they're willing to think about it. Are they at preparation? Yes, I'm going to start running today. I'm going to start eating more fruits and vegetables. I'm going to do whatever it is. I'm going to start tomorrow. It's not like I'm not doing it would be action, but it's like I'm going to go buy more fruits and vegetables. I'm going to join the gym. I'm going to do whatever it is to get ready. Action is where they're actually doing it, and maintenance is where they've been maintaining it for a certain amount of time. So we use stage-based newsletters that had been developed by another researcher for part of this larger consortium. That's one of the things I was really lucky with, was I did not have to develop them. They'd already tested them with focus groups. They were one piece of a very multimodal approach. We used motivational interviewing. We used the stage-based newsletters. We developed a website. I had students sending out emails based on what the people had told me in their motivational interviewing. And we had some recipes and some other things. You can kind of read through that as far as. We did have 157 students completed the intervention group, which meant I did motivational interviewing with 157 students, which took quite a bit of time. So I had my planner out. We see our dietetic students are always very organized. They have their planner and they have everything. I had one of those that's like every student I had, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes. So I was like learning to be a dietitian before I was actually a dietitian with all these little appointments. And they were recorded. And so that's one of the things where my advisor later is like, we should do transcriptions of all those recordings and we could have a whole nother article. And I'm thinking, like, when would I have time to do that? And so it never happened. It's one of those, I have different regrets. It's like, man, that would have been great. Yeah, I wish we had done that. That's a long time ago. We're not going to go back and look at that data now. But anyway, you do what you can with what you have. Interesting tidbits from this story, or from this published manuscript. Fun fact, we used ice cream cones to recruit. Now, as a dietitian, it's like I'm always trying to get people to not use food as a reward and not use sugary foods as a reward. But I was a student then, so I didn't know any better. That's my excuse anyway. I'm sticking with it. But they were cheap. So like for $1, we could get them, and it's like there's $1 incentive. And so as the undergraduate students, and I was a little bit older student because I'd been out working doing other stuff before I went to dietetics, as they were over in the student union, which is what we call, what's equivalent to the UC here, the students would be walking by and they'd be like, hey, do you want an ice cream cone? It's like, would you fill out the survey? And so they'd fill out the survey, they'd get the ice cream cone, and then we'd follow up with them to try to get them to actually participate in the study. And I was at South Dakota State University, which is a big dairy place, and we had the dairy barn, which was known for having very good ice cream. And so it was a very popular and very simple recruiting tool. The undergraduate students were very good at recruiting, and I ended up with a lot of students. And we'd done the sample size calculation. So some of those of you who are familiar with human research, you need to do a sample size calculation to determine if you have enough people to show that you made a difference. You look at previously published studies, and how many people did they have to have in order to show a difference. And so I'd done those calculations. We needed a lot of students, and we needed to allow for people dropping out. The other thing that was really interesting about this study that was not in the paper, but was when I interviewed these students, and I would say, because part of the motivational interviewing is, first we'd figure out what stage of change they were. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated or interested are you in whatever, to use it, whatever it is. In this case, it was increasing your fruits and vegetables. Well, someone that's very motivated, they might say like an 8. And someone that's not very motivated might say like a 2. And so then you ask them, why did you not pick a higher number? And they tell you why they don't want to change. You ask them why they did not pick a lower number. They tell you, well, because, and the reasons they do want to change. Some of the 18 to 24-year-olds, and it tended to be more the males, when I'd say, and sometimes they'd be like 0, and I'd be like, the scale was 1 to 10. But I mean, I don't tell them that. It's like, okay. But I'd say, well, what would have to change? What would have to change for you to be more motivated? And they would say something like, I'd have to have a heart attack. And I'm thinking, okay, that's going to be, let's see, you're 18 now. That's probably not going to happen until you're 50 or whatever. And so it's just a sad thing to think about, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And the truth of the matter is once they do have that heart attack, if they're the ones that have it, they still might not be ready to change. But there are theories we've learned along the way of working with people to try to help them shift some of that thinking. And this study didn't test those, but there's room for more future studies in that area. All right, so because I didn't know who my audience would be, and I don't know who's going to watch it later and who might be on now, I tried to aim this at kind of a broader thing, and I put right in there that this is going to try to be tips and strategies for those that maybe aren't as far along in this pathway. So you're in a non-academic job and think you can't contribute to research. So think again. And partly I'm going to use my own example because after I got done with my master's degree, they were trying to talk me into going to get my PhD, and I was like, nope, I have to work. I was very insistent, I have to work. I did say the sense like you're supposed to work first and then you go get your PhD. So I did. And as I was out there working, I worked for the South Dakota Department of Education, and I wrote USDA grants, and we did things all across the state that I would oversee, and I was trying to increase fruit and vegetable consumption. I knew how important it was for health, et cetera. And so I knew that with my nieces and with others, I'd done all these fun things, and they'd get excited about stuff, and I thought, this has got to work. And we did all these fun things, but we weren't testing it. And so I called up, or maybe I emailed, my former master's advisor and said, we've got these schools all across the state and child care centers doing these fun projects. What would you think about doing a research study? And she's like, that sounds like a great idea. So it worked out well for her because I provided the data, the money to fund it, to give to these different schools. It worked out well for me because I got put on as an author. And so I was in a non-academic job. I didn't really have time to do research, and I wasn't set up well. I didn't have access to statisticians, all those things. But I was able to contribute to it in that way. This actually was, the first author is an undergraduate student. So undergraduate students can get papers. Obviously that advisor, my advisor, I'm sure helped her with like, how do you write this, that, and whatever. But that would have helped her get off to an excellent start. And this was, so just a quick flyby in that study. Lots of different fun events. It was open to the school to determine what that might be. But it did show a difference. Children's interest in fruits and vegetables was increased. This is where, if we had a little more time, I'm going to see what we're coming along on time now. We would probably do a little event, and I would kind of demonstrate what the things are. You might have you all get up. We would do some different stuff. But I think what I'm going to do is keep going. And if we have a little more time at the end, we'll add that back in later. So non-tenure track instructors without terminal degrees. Yes, you too can do important research and be published. And so my next publications, I have several of them, came while I was at the University of South Dakota as their dietetic internship director. And the way that works, for those of you that aren't familiar with dietetics, is that, and it's changing over, it's kind of, excuse me, shifting over, but a graduate level supervised practice programs for the dietetics pathway to become a dietitian were called dietetic internships. And we still have those, but they're incorporated now into master's level programs. And so I was overseeing this accredited supervised practice program at the graduate level, but it was not for a degree. And I was asked by colleagues, I was actually put on a study, they had some funding and they wanted a dietetic person. This is another one that just kind of fell in my lap. And so we did a lot of different activities and they were wanting to get published and they were writing the articles, but I was helping. So there again, I got added as an author. So it didn't take nearly as much time. A lot of that's about developing those relationships, finding ways to collaborate, and sometimes luck has a little part of it too, but a lot of it's finding those ways. We did some really cool things, which I can talk more about maybe afterwards, so I'm not spending a lot of time here. But it was a great educational opportunity for my students. They learned a lot while they were doing it, and then we got to do some research to see how did it impact them? Are they going to be better healthcare team members from having done this? This bottom one, I only put that up there because this one I probably could have been an author on it, but I was busy enough I let other people do it. But there again, it was a different interdisciplinary event with a much larger group. It was not grant funded. It was a really cool event, but anyway. So you're new tenure track faculty and are really short on time. I remember being there. You are short on time, and then, or maybe you're a current one and you're just, it's like everything's in small print. So that little I is supposed to be small. I changed it to a big capital I, and that was just like, it looks weird. Everything else is not capitalized. So just, I'm not always the best at grammar, but that one's supposed to be that way. It's trying to be like a little more humble, I guess, maybe. It's hard. We're at a teaching college. We're at a college where it's like there's not time built into this. Some of the other colleges that have more money, they give you research time. We don't have that. Some of us aren't overloaded. Like I'm teaching an extra class this semester. It's hard to fit these things, and a lot of my stuff gets done during the summer. But there are still ways sometimes to fit this in, and so I want to talk about that. And I already addressed that a little bit. Part of it's keeping it simple. Part of it's just figuring out what's doable for you right now. What can you do with your schedule? I have heard some wise words from different people over the years. I've never implemented it very well, but sometimes it's like figuring out like 4 hours a week. Maybe Friday afternoon is your 4 hours. You turn off the computer, you turn off your phone, you don't have office hours and whatever it is, and you just focus and you make sure that you sit and you just work on it. It's like people that are trying to write a book. Sometimes it's not, it's like I don't feel like writing. It's like, well, that doesn't matter. You sit down, you write something. At least you did something, and part of the time you're going to be more productive. So I can't say that I am good at that, but that is one of the strategies that's recommended. For me, a lot of it is working in the summers and then just setting up deadlines. Like, oh, I told them I would have this by tomorrow. I guess I better start working on that. So it's like I hadn't gotten to it before, but I better get that done. And building those collaborations. Many hands make light work is a really old quote. I was trying to find the original author, and it sounds like it goes way back to Greek and such like that as far as different versions of it. But that's true. So the more you can find ways to collaborate, the better. So my small bite-sized research, this is what I'm doing now. I mean, I've got this one publication I've been working on forever that's been its kind of own little challenge, and it's going to get published. I've been told I've been accepted for publication with condition I go back and redo the stats. And that's what we've been working on. I had a statistician on it. There's different pieces with that. We're almost to that point where it should now be able to be published. But in the meantime, it's hard to fit stuff in, so I'm doing little tiny things. And so one of my colleagues, Laura Littleton, and I've been doing a couple different projects in Gooch Hall. Others of you, we've talked about things. We haven't gotten it done, but that time is going to come. The interdisciplinary research projects I did that I mentioned before, those are kind of small bite-sized things. It's like we were doing something already. Let's evaluate. Let's see if it made a difference. And I got posters out of it. Posters count. I added research requirements from a class I teach. I already have to do something in that class anyway. So if I have them do research, and then maybe I may have a little extra work part of the time, but then they can get some posters. Eventually, I might get some posters with my name on it too as well. And I'm sure I can count it on some checkbox for something for my performance evaluation. This is just an example of the bite-size research. So dietetic and nursing students, which evaluated 2 different years. This was a national poster. I was at Fancy. I don't remember where we were that year, maybe Boston. It's not all that hard to get accepted those things. I did some statistics we could report on it. A different one, which I have here, this is one that one of my colleagues and I worked on. There were some challenges with it. We talk about misadventures. There's some kind of interesting things that happened, but it was a pilot project. That's what pilot projects are for, is to figure out the little bugs and stuff like, okay, we're going to do it again, and next time we're going to do it differently. But we still got to present it at a statewide conference. It still counts. And even though our results, we didn't show a difference, that's important because it shows that we need to adjust things and we can do things differently. This one, the 5 up, 5 down, we did this last year. I still need to do statistics for it, so that's me. I'll get that done. My summer didn't go as planned. Some things, unexpected things happened, but we're going to get that done. So then we'll have a poster for that too. Slow but steady work on research manuscript. I've already kind of talked about that. That's a story for another day. So another day, we'll report on that. It's some interesting things from that, so it'll be good to talk about a different time. Those that got away, so we think about the fish that got away. I'm a vegetarian. I'm actually vegan. So I was like, how do I say this in a vegetarian way? So those that got away, or there's always an alternative way to skin a cantaloupe. So for those of you older, you probably heard there's another way to skin a cat. And I was like, oh, that's horrifying. I love cats. But anyway, there's another way to skin a cantaloupe. There's, as a nutrition person, I mean, we know there's ways that it's actually much more helpful to skin it. So it applies to fruits and vegetables too, and that fits for my research. Over the years, this is kind of the misadventures. I've had a lot of ideas. I've had a lot of conversations with people. It's like, we should do this or we should do that. And they've not all come to fruition. There's just been something got in the way. COVID got in the way. I don't know about the rest of you, but that really messed up my research plans. We had a lot of different things. One of my colleagues and I were planning to do something. It's like we couldn't be on campus. But we move on from that. So this is the story of those that got away, and a way that I've found to make an impact. Now a lot of that's those little bites. Let's just keep working on stuff, and we just keep trying. Best practices. Oh, that's what I want to tell you about here too. Best practices. So in my classrooms, especially one of the classes I no longer teach, so Brian Carroll now teaches it, I would do a lot of drama. We'd have students get up, we'd move around, they'd act out different physiological processes, and then they would tell me these really cool things afterwards, like, I wish my teachers in other classes would have done it that way. It's like my dietetic interns told me this first when I was at the University of South Dakota. They had been through undergraduate physiology classes, biochemistry classes, nutritional biochemistry classes, and be like, the teachers spent all this time trying to teach this to us. And it's like, I finally now understand it. And so they would act things out, whether it was carbohydrates, digestion, whether it was receptors in the GI system, whatever it was, all the different things that interfere. And then what they would tell me too is, okay, I took the test and I remembered that Michelle was such and such, and Lisa was such and such, and Tom was this one. It's like I could remember all the pieces, and it's like, this is really cool. And so I had been hoping all this time to do a study on this. I'm not actually now teaching the class anymore, so I may have to talk Brian Carroll into doing something with that. But the other piece is, I always had a small number of class students, and the larger your class number, the better, and ideally you'd have a control group. And so my goal had always been, I need to recruit some people from other campuses that are teaching some of this kind of thing. So maybe I can talk to others out in the group and see if we can figure something out one of these years. So it's probably not, but you never know. But best practices, I've done national presentations on this more as a best practice. And to me, it's getting the word out that you can do these fun things, and it makes a difference, and maybe someday somebody will test some of it. So. All right, here's my alas quote. If I'd had more poetry training, this would probably be better. But anyway, this is my attempt at kind of, lighthearted. So collaboration with colleagues, alas, woe is me. Lost opportunities, gone, but not forgotten. Yet to this dream I shall cling. But yet, the sun comes up. One more time again. Let's all keep trying on this one, shall we? So it's like, we just keep plugging away. We just keep doing the best we can, and we keep putting stuff out there, and some of it works. The drama in the classroom, I already kind of talked about this. If we had a little more time, I might actually have us get up and move around and do it. But it would be good to have it formally evaluated. They are doing it in other disciplines. I've seen some of that, where like the drama or the art club, or maybe not the art club, the art teachers are doing some of this. Maybe it's in an English class or something. There are ways to incorporate more of this. And so while I feel like my window of opportunity is passed, I don't want to teach that class, maybe it hasn't. Maybe I'll find a different way to evaluate that. All right, that is it for my actual presentation. Do you have questions?
For trying to increase stair usage instead of elevator?
So there was. So For the
And,
first,
be-
yeah, so the first time we did
Be
two
sure
different
that you
projects.
repeat the question, Amy.
Oh, yes, I'm
when-
sorry, yes, thank you. So sorry, yeah, because for the people on the video, or the other. So the question was there incentive for trying to get people to increase their stairway usage? And so we did two different projects. The first project particularly had that as something we were trying to increase. And so it wasn't in the usual way though. What we did was, it's an interesting way we did it, I guess, was we had fruits and vegetables at the top of the stairs. And we had, the incentive was if you got seen with a fruit or vegetable, then you could, I think it was spin the wheel for a prize. And that was down on the first floor. So the idea was they would take the stairs up to the top, get their fruit and vegetable, hopefully they didn't take the elevator down, and then come back down to the bottom, be seen with the fruit or vegetable, then they could spin for various prizes, and we had a lot of different prizes. One of the big challenges of that one was there are really a lot of stairwells in Gooch Hall. So we had Gooch Hall, and then we had a different building, the Humanities Building, as our control group. And so we knew it was a pilot project. We knew it's like it may or may not work, but we didn't have a lot of time. It's like, let's try it. Let's just see what we learn from it. The other thing that was really challenging that I didn't really anticipate, and that now I know that you should have actual stair counters, like use some kind of little app, like that has a little laser light or something, was we had students positioned at all these different stairwells. What I didn't really think about was trying to make sure they were exactly timed. Because it's like if someone started 1 minute later that day, there could be some variation between the different measures and all that kind of stuff. And then just, it was hard. Like when I'd be over there, it's like, okay, there's just a crowd of people going up that stairs. It's like really hard to count who all's there. And then there's just a lot of other things. Like, were they there the day we were doing? I mean, we did a lot, but we weren't there 24/7. So yes, there was. And yes, there were a lot of different variables. But it was an interesting project. I still like to try that one again, only using some different methods. But good question, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I actually have a microphone, so.
So I don't have to repeat your question. That's good.
Was the project you just mentioned, was that 5 up, 5 down, or was that something different?
That was the first Gooch Hall pilot project, which was just called the Gooch Hall Pilot Project. And then once we did another one, it's like we need a different name for it, so we called it 5 up. The idea being like 5 fruits and vegetables, just that kind of the 5 a day kind of thing. So.
And then my other question was, going back to the South Dakota experience, what are fun food things that you do with young people?
Well, one of the things that we did that was actually very popular was the Power Panther is a blue mascot from the USDA, and I think they still maybe use that. We actually could borrow it from USDA, so they had it shipped to us, and we did a Power Panther kind of world tour. And so I got the costume rented. I was working with Extension, and we took a tour around the state. I was in the Power Panther costume part of the time. And we encouraged students and schools later to do this. But when we did that world tour thing, they set up student assemblies, and we would be there. Either I'd be in the costume or I'd be there alongside the Power Panther. And I wrote up this script, and we did. Students got really excited about this. And so it's like they'd come for this student assembly. Sometimes it was just all little kids. Sometimes it was all big kids. Sometimes it was a mixture. But this Power Panther was like, the Power Panther can't talk. It's like you're looking out through the mouth. But so I would talk for the Power Panther, and usually I was the one with. But we talked about how we're going to take this trip. Where would you like to go? And so then the students, they'd start raising their hand about where they wanted to go. They wanted to go to Hawaii. They wanted to go to wherever, these different places. And so then we would do different physical activities. Okay, let's start flying. I was going to pretend we're flying. So they'd all be flapping their wings. Let's start running. We'd climb a tree. Let's stop and take a break. Maybe we'll climb that tree and pick an apple, that kind of thing. Or for swimming, we did all the motion. They got lots of physical activity. And then I would add some different things. And they're like, okay, there's a shark. We better swim faster. So they'd all be swimming faster. And that's one example. So we did some gardening. There's that kind of stuff. There were gardening grants. Sometimes they did different things where they would have tasting things. And so when we actually did the one where we did the research, that was not the world tour of the Power Panther. That was more of a script that we went from place to place. And we'd always have taste testing with it. But the idea was to get the kids thinking about fruits and vegetables in a more fun way. Because there's research that shows, and just people notice this is happening as well, when you have one child, the parents will say, like, at home, they'll never try this. But when they're around other children, and all the children do, there's some peer pressure, they're like, all the other kids are eating this, maybe I'll try it. And they're like, oh, maybe I do like it after all. And so you get them excited about it, and they're more likely to try it, and their perceptions can change. So good question, thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes?
Are there certain vegetables or things that the kids prefer and enjoy?
So the one study that looked at that, there was some, and I can't list them off the top of my head. I'd have to talk to you afterwards about that. But it's like some of the ones you would expect maybe the change didn't, but they did find there were certain vegetables that did to shift. Now, we would need to repeat that study again to see if that was a little bit random chance. But because for starters, that particular project, we did not have a uniform fun fruit and vegetable event from place to place to place. So we don't always know that they even served all the different things on that list. Like blueberries actually went down in popularity, which seems very surprising to me. But I mean, it could have also been, sometimes blueberries are sour. hour. So it depends on what they had, what was available, and that would have been through the food service, what they were able to get typically. So yeah, but yeah, good question, thank you. Any other questions? Yes? Yes?
Did you do yoga versus stretching already?
So the question is, did I already talk about yoga versus stretching? And the answer is I skipped over that one because I didn't figure there was enough time. And so I don't have the stats per se to tell you that, but we did find that it made, so it depends which study you're looking at. One of those is the one that's getting ready to be published. And so that's the weight loss one. It didn't, both groups lost weight. The one in the weight loss, the yoga group lost weight, the stretching group lost weight. And that can happen. So that might mean that they're both helpful. There are other things that we looked at. We looked at eating behaviors. It gets kind of complicated, but we looked at emotional eating, uncontrolled eating, and we looked at restrictive eating as ways to control your appetite. We looked at stress, so that makes a difference, both in that study and then in a separate study that was just a correlation study where we looked at all those. The separate correlation study has been published, and it found some differences, and there again, that takes some time to, so I might talk with you more afterwards. The other one is not published yet, and we're still sorting out kind of, and there's been some disagreement with different people, so with statisticians, when there's like, is this or is this not reportable? And so that's one reason I don't really want to talk about it a lot until it's like I've actually got it back in, and they're like, yes, we're okay with that. But anyway, but yeah, so I would say just as a general kind of over thing from it, it's like I think both of them have some merit, because just stretching itself can actually be quite relaxing. And that might have been partly why we had a hard time showing a difference. You know, it was our control group, but and my thought originally was, yoga, there's a lot of emphasis on breathing and relaxing, and we know that stress plays a role in eating and in sleep. And so if we can help people learn some of that relaxation, maybe that'll help with their eating. But stretching, a lot of times if you're watching a stretching video, they might tell you to breathe. I mean, they sometimes incorporate some of those same pieces into it. And just by laying down and stretching, or sitting down and stretching, you might change your breathing, you might start relaxing. So there's different ways they overlap. So good question. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you
Great.
very
Well,
much.
thank you very much. I hope that folks had the opportunity to ask questions, but I know that Dr. Richards will be here if you'd like to chat with her. We do still have some refreshments left over, so I'd ask you to help yourself there. And keep in mind, you can follow the library and its event series on Facebook, on Instagram, and we also use the Runway event platform to post things. So keep an eye out for the things that are going on here. And with that, maybe you could give one last round of applause to our featured faculty member. Thank you.